AITHA for letting my mother-in-law be homeless rather than taking her in. Hi everyone, I'm excited to share my story today. I'm from the Midwest, and I've been a long-time listener of this channel. I really need your thoughts on a situation that's been weighing on me. My husband, whom I'll call Tom, is truly the most wonderful man. He's sweet, kind, and incredibly loyal. I feel so lucky to be his wife. I've always tried to maintain a cordial relationship with my in-laws, but it hasn't been easy. Tom lovingly calls me his little pit bull because I stand up for him, especially when it comes to his family. Tom has a very complicated relationship with his mother and two sisters. Before I came into the picture, he was left to navigate their toxic dynamics alone. His father passed away when he was young, leaving him a significant sum of money that his mother quickly squandered. She guilted him into supporting her, quitting her job and relying on him to pay every bill. Over the years, she has ruined his credit multiple times, putting his name on bills without his consent and failing to pay them. When he tries to stand up for himself, she lashes out, using guilt and even threats to manipulate him. His sisters mirror this behavior, constantly asking him for money and spending it on themselves instead of their children. We've helped them countless times, spending thousands to keep them afloat, but they always come back for more. When we refuse, we're met with hostility and harassment. Currently, they all live in a cramped apartment, and the environment is chaotic. One moment they're fighting, and the next they're acting like best friends. The sisters want to kick their mother out, and last year, we helped her get out of that toxic situation by paying for her to get an apartment. We set her up for success, but she couldn't maintain it, and ended up back with them. Now they're asking us to take her in again. I have to be honest, absolutely not. We're trying to start our own family. And after everything Tom has endured, it's time for his family to face some real consequences. So, Reddit, am I the bad guy for not taking her in? Fiancé broke up with me and his brother is harassing me over money from our joint account. I was engaged to Cam, and we had been together for 4 years, planning to marry this coming May. But a week before Thanksgiving, he broke up with me, saying he had lost hope for our future. It hurt deeply, but I respected his decision and didn't try to change his mind. We had moved in together in January after getting engaged in December, as I was starting grad school in the same city. For now, we're still living together in our 2-bedroom apartment, but he's in the other room until he finds a new place. Back in August, we opened a joint savings account for our honeymoon and wedding expenses. We agreed to contribute $500 each month, which was a stretch for both of us as grad students. Earlier in the year, finances were messy. Cam insisted we live together, but he couldn't get out of his old lease until the end of July. During that time, I paid all our joint apartment expenses and groceries. Even after we started splitting rent and utilities, I continued to cover groceries. Several larger purchases like pet sitting and car maintenance went on my credit card, with the understanding that he would pay me back once he got a raise in January, or after the wedding. When I finally added everything up, excluding shared bills, I realized he owed me just under $2,000. The joint savings account had about $4,000 in it, but when I checked the deposit history, I saw that Cam had only contributed $1,250 total. I had assumed it was much closer to even. We had discussed figuring out what he owed me and what to do with the joint account. Initially, I thought he owed me around $800, but once I saw the actual numbers, I decided to keep the money in the joint account and call it even to avoid chasing him for repayment. A few days ago, right before he left town for break, Cam asked what we were doing about the joint account. I told him I was keeping it. He got defensive and upset, but I stood my ground. He eventually stopped arguing, but he was visibly emotional and started crying. I couldn't comfort him because I was overwhelmed, so I called his mom to let her know what was happening and that he might need support. She was incredibly kind and kept checking on me, apologizing even though I reassured her it wasn't her fault. Cam's older brother, Kyle, had openly disliked me from the start. The first week I met him, he interrupted a conversation to say, "I hate her, she talks too much," and that set the tone for our relationship. Apparently, Kyle overheard Cam talking to their mom about the money and how he would need help from their parents for deposits on his new apartment because I was keeping the joint account. Within about 10 minutes, Kyle bombarded me with messages on Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook Messenger. I didn't open them right away because I was on the phone with a friend. When I finally looked, there was a torrent of messages demanding I give the money back immediately and that I'd better treat him right. He even called me a worthless jerk and claimed that everyone would know how I stole from his brother. At that point, it felt like harassment given the volume of messages across so many platforms. I took screenshots and sent them to Cam's parents, explaining how much money I was keeping. I offered to itemize everything Cam owed me, but made it clear I wouldn't tolerate being spoken to the way Kyle had. Following my mom's and my friend's advice, I blocked Kyle on Snapchat, where the worst messages were. Both of Cam's parents immediately told me to ignore Kyle, assuring me there was no need for an invoice and that they would handle him. Since then, they've reached out separately to tell me they love me, that I'm still family to them, and to let them know if Kyle contacts me again. I'm not sure what will come next, but I know one thing. I will never again have to sit at a dinner table swallowing my reactions to Kyle's barbed comments. I miss Cam, and I will miss his parents and little sister, but I haven't shed a single tear over never speaking to Kyle again. Petty revenge with a little bit of pro-revenge? I like to think so. Hello there, beautiful Redditors. I'm a 36-year-old woman with a story of petty revenge that might have a hint of pro-revenge mixed in. I grew up in a deeply abusive and neglectful home, which led me to years of therapy. I struggled with complex PTSD, anxiety, and attempts to reconcile with my parents. Unfortunately, they made it clear they had no intention of changing their ways, so I went no contact with them. My father, in particular, is a narcissist who tries to control everyone around him. When I married my husband, he sat me down and insisted I get my husband in line because he thought he was being disrespected. That's when I realized how severe the problem was. My mother followed my father's every whim, and after years of trying to set boundaries, my father slammed his hand on the table and declared, "I am who I am, and you're not going to change me." He even threatened me, saying that if anyone ever called Child Protective Services on him, he would lie to them and make it look like I was well taken care of. This was just a fraction of the abuse I endured from both him and my mother. So where does the revenge come in? I started seeing a trauma therapist who encouraged me to embrace my anger as part of the healing process. I had never been allowed to express my anger before, as it was dangerous with my father. During one session, we discussed small ways to inconvenience my parents, like signing them up for telemarketer calls or other harmless annoyances. I went home and found a website dedicated to free stickers from various organizations. I signed my father up for several, around 20 to 30, under a misspelled version of his name. He despised it when people got his name wrong, which made it all the more satisfying. For a while, I didn't hear anything from them, but I would chuckle to myself about it. Then, about a year later, I learned they had moved. They stayed in the same area, but they had relocated. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then it hit me. They lived in an apartment with a small community mailbox, and I couldn't help but wonder if all those stickers and mailings contributed to their decision to move. My parents were known hoarders, and it would have been a huge effort for them to leave their home after 14 years. So I like to imagine that I played a small part in spooking them out of their fancy apartment. So is this petty revenge or pro-revenge? You tell me. Apparently Christmas snuck up on my 33-year-old boyfriend. My boyfriend and I have been together for a little over a year, and we've been living together for almost as long. This was our second Christmas together. Last year we exchanged gifts, but this year I got him presents, and he didn't get me anything. When I asked him about it, he said he assumed we weren't doing gifts this year because we've both been busy with work. The thing is, we never discussed skipping gifts. There was no agreement, just an assumption on his part. Christmas is on the same day every year. He's had 32 of them, and with online shopping, there was no excuse for not planning ahead. After we talked, he said, "Holidays are important to me as well, but they aren't all about gifts. I'd understand if you couldn't get me something." On the surface, that sounds reasonable, but it felt emotionally flat, like he was minimizing my feelings. A side note, when I started a new job a few months ago, I asked him for a lunchbox, thinking I'd get that for Christmas, but I received nothing. I'm not upset about the money or needing something extravagant. I'm hurt by the lack of thought and effort, especially since we've exchanged gifts before. Am I overreacting? Is this a red flag or just mismatched expectations? I do all the cooking and cleaning, and when I came home one day, I saw he had stopped at Target for something. I asked if they didn't sell lunchboxes there anymore. He replied, "Oh my gosh, I wasn't even thinking about that. I'm the worst. He repeated that he was the worst several times and later apologized. When I told him my feelings were hurt, he said, "Over a lunchbox?" I explained that it wasn't just about that. I thought I'd at least get a lunchbox for Christmas, and he responded, "Oh, so we're still talking about this?" I'm still bothered. He did end up getting me a lunchbox, but it felt like a way to silence me, rather than addressing the bigger issue. We mostly communicate through text due to our busy schedules, which isn't ideal. He finally said we need to talk when we get home, acknowledging that there's a disconnect between us. I'll keep you posted on how it goes.
My parent was way too attentive about me masturbating when I was a kid. Maybe it was weird, I guess I have to admit it now. Some things happened when I was a kid, and I'm not sure if they were actually bad or not. This is a burner account because just acknowledging what happened back then is a challenge for me. I desperately need to hear someone's thoughts after years of denial. To start, my family was a mess. My parents were in a loveless marriage, constantly fighting. My mom would cry quietly in my room at night, feeling trapped in a marriage she thought she couldn't escape. I was bullied relentlessly by my older brother, whom I loved and adored. It was a sad situation. It's uncomfortable to share, but I started exploring my body at a young age, around 5. I knew it was something unusual, but I didn't think much of it. It was just a way to relieve stress. I wasn't aware of sexuality, and I never acted inappropriately toward anyone. I kept it private. Then my father caught on. I think he walked in on me once, but I made excuses, and he left. The next time, I was in the bath. I always locked the door, but the locks weren't very secure. He walked in and simply said, "Stop doing that," before leaving. Later, when I came out of the bathroom, he approached me and said, "You should stop doing that. It's bad for your health." I felt scared and embarrassed, even though I didn't fully understand what I was doing. I promised to behave. Days later, he asked me, "So, you stopped doing that thing?" I felt incredibly ashamed and assured him I would never do it again. Then my grandmother visited. One evening, when I was about to take a bath, my father told her, "She doesn't know how to shower properly, please watch over her." So, she helped me wash myself, which felt really strange since I was around 7 or 8 at that time. No one had ever helped me shower at that age. Now, I realize he asked her to keep an eye on me so I wouldn't explore myself. That's when my problems began. For years, until I turned 15, I became paranoid about anyone finding out. I felt overwhelming guilt and shame. I had nightmares about my parents discovering my secret and disowning me, sending me to an orphanage. I thought I was a filthy abomination. Being raised in a religious family, I believed that every time I explored my body, I was drawing closer to eternal punishment. It was awful, absolute torment. Fortunately, my father never brought up anything sexual again. Now, as an adult, I deal with diagnosed mental health issues and struggles with daily life. Many bad things happened in my childhood beyond this story. I wonder if this contributed to my challenges. Was it truly bad, or am I just overreacting? Is this a normal childhood experience? I really have no idea.
You won't let me leave when I'm obviously sick? Let's see what your boss has to say. You all seem to enjoy my last post about my old boss, Jack, so I wanted to share another story that recently came to mind when my allergies flared up. Just to recap, Jack was brought in to fix the restaurant and loved exercising his power as the general manager, often avoiding actual work. At the time of this story, I was 17, working at the restaurant after school to save for college. I suffered from terrible seasonal allergies, so much so that I had 3 bottles of strong antihistamines stashed around me. However, on this particular day, I hadn't taken anything because my allergies weren't usually bad enough to warrant it. That morning, I was working the drive-thru right next to a Palo Verde tree. If you've experienced one of those trees in the fall, you know how bad the pollen can get. After about an hour, my nose was running uncontrollably. I knew I needed to do something, so I approached Jack to find a solution. I asked if I could move to another station to escape the pollen. "No," he said, "we've got a full staff today, and I'm not willing to move you around." I then asked if I could leave briefly to grab some over-the-counter antihistamines. He shot that down too, claiming it was company policy not to let employees leave during their shift. I was baffled. I was clearly struggling, yet he insisted I stay and serve customers while I dripped snot all over the counter. Realizing he wouldn't budge, I decided to comply with his demands in my own way. I was friendly with the franchise owner, Sam, who often stopped by during my shift. I knew he'd be there soon, and I hoped he would see how poorly Jack was handling the situation. I grabbed a box of tissues from the staff bathroom and settled in, making my way through that box and then some before Sam finally arrived. My throat was sore, and I could only imagine how I looked to the customers. When Sam approached, he immediately noticed my condition. "OP, are you feeling okay? You don't look well," he said. I replied, "I'm hanging in there. My allergies are acting up." Sam frowned and asked why I hadn't moved or taken something for it. I explained that Jack had refused both options and insisted I tough it out. Sam's expression shifted to one of determination. "Come with me," he said, leading me to the back office where Jack was. Jack frowned when he saw me. "OP, what are you doing back here? You need to stay at your station," he admonished. Before I could respond, Sam interjected. "I had someone cover him. Why did you keep him on the drive-thru when the tree was making his allergies act up?" Jack tried to defend himself, but Sam cut him off. "We're not even that busy. You could have easily moved OP or sent him home." Jack continued to justify his decision, claiming he asked the other employees, but Sam turned to me and said, "I'm sending you home. You're in no state to finish your shift." I thanked him and left, but Sam closed the office door, so I missed the conversation that followed. I clocked out and rushed to the corner store to grab some medicine to stop the runny nose. Unfortunately, I later developed a lingering cough, which led me to urgent care. I found out that all that mucus had ended up in my lungs, and I had pneumonia. After a doctor-prescribed day of rest, some steroids, and a week of medication, I finally recovered. To this day, I always carry antihistamines with me to prevent that from happening again. As for Jack, nothing seemed to happen to him, but that incident did get mentioned in the next staff meeting. Sam reminded everyone that employees shouldn't come to work sick and should be sent home if they develop symptoms. Sadly, I quickly found a new job where I was much happier. Jack is still there, but I've heard he's planning to quit soon to move abroad with his girlfriend. My heart goes out to her. I'll try to remember more stories about Jack. There are plenty more, but it's been a while, so some details might be a bit foggy.
My girlfriend 21F and my brother 20 male are soulmates. I've been dating my girlfriend for about 7 months now. We met while working at the same restaurant, and I asked her out. From the start, I realized we were quite different, but that's what drew me to her. Being around her feels like a constant learning experience, and I genuinely try to embrace her interests. 3 months ago, I introduced her to my family, and they all seemed to like her, especially my brother. I was happy to see them get along since I'm very close to him. But over time, I noticed they just clicked in a way that felt deeper than what I had with her. They share so many interests: movies, books, music, sports, you name it. At first, my girlfriend was hesitant to hang out with my brother without me, but I encouraged her to go for it if it was something I wasn't into. They had a great time together. I can't help but feel that they look happier with each other than they do with me. Sometimes I feel out of place when I'm around them, as if I'm intruding on a connection that's meant for the two of them. This isn't jealousy, it's a realization. I love both of them, and if they're happier together, I'd rather step aside. But I'm not sure how to approach this, or even how to talk about it with either of them. How do I set them up without making things awkward? After my initial post, I took a step back to reflect on everything. I realized I struggle with low self-esteem and that it often affects my relationships. I was honest with my girlfriend about my feelings, though I didn't explicitly say I thought she and my brother were soulmates. Instead, I shared that sometimes I felt a disconnect because of our differences. Her response changed everything for me. She told me she loves that I'm different and that I complete her in a way she values. She even expressed a desire to get more involved in my hobbies. Since then, we've been spending time doing things we each enjoy, and it has been wonderful. I've also met her family, and they're lovely people. We still hang out with my brother, and it's a good time. I've come to realize that my insecurities were the root of my worries, not my brother. I enjoy his company because of who he is, and it makes sense that I be with someone who complements my life. Ultimately, I've learned that my girlfriend is so much more than just her interests. There are countless qualities about her that set her apart. I'm grateful for the advice I received and the journey of self-discovery it led me on.
Tiff update: became a prostitute. About a year ago, I shared a brief story about how I started performing sexual favors for money while struggling with alcoholism and a gambling addiction. Many of you connected with my experience, and some of your comments really changed how I viewed my situation. So, I thought it was time for an update, even if it's a bit late. I didn't hear from Barb for about a month after our awkward encounter at the bar, which sparked my original post. During that time, I imagined she was with someone else. It turned out she was visiting her brother in Arizona. When Barb finally reached out one night in January, she asked for help taking down her Christmas lights. To my surprise, that's all she wanted. I explained my sudden departure at the bar, and she reassured me that she had told my friends she was just joking and felt bad for making me uncomfortable. They thought I was overreacting. I asked Barb to keep things discreet, but she said she didn't want to continue our previous arrangement. She explained that she got caught up in the moment, but now felt uneasy about it. While she was open to hooking up for fun, she didn't want to pay for it anymore because it made her feel uncomfortable. I didn't share that I wasn't attracted to her, but I told her I was only interested in sex with women I was pursuing for a relationship. I mentioned that I had only recently discovered I could make exceptions for money, a realization influenced by some of your comments encouraging me to embrace that side of things. At the time, I was participating in a mostly dry January with friends, which helped me feel clear-headed and distanced from gambling. I also made a significant career change that, while resulting in less pay, brought me to a single job with far less stress. I still drink socially and gamble, but much less frequently and for smaller amounts. Barb reached out a couple of times in February and March, but now we just see each other at the bar occasionally. We smile, chat, and laugh, both seemingly past that chapter of our lives. Things have genuinely improved for me. At 33, I feel positive about my life. I'm not exactly where I want to be or where I could have been with better choices, but I'm happy with who I am, how I treat others, and the direction my future is heading. In short, I no longer make thousands by having sex with an older woman, but I'm leading a healthier, happier life. You're right. You are never working with me again. About 7 years ago, I was promoted to office manager at a small construction company. I quickly realized I had inherited a chaotic role. The previous office manager had left things disorganized and struggled with technology. Though I was new to this kind of work, I was detail-oriented and determined to make sense of everything. 2 months into my role, the owner decided he only wanted to sign checks once a week. He instructed me to inform our vendors that any invoices received from Friday to Thursday at noon would be processed on Fridays. This was a big change for many vendors, especially truck drivers who often paid out of pocket for materials before delivering them. I sent out an email explaining the new policy, giving everyone about 2 weeks' notice. Most vendors accepted it, but one in particular was not happy. He expressed that it would be a headache, and while I apologized, I explained that we couldn't make exceptions. A few weeks later, he called me in a rage, demanding his check immediately. I calmly told him it would be signed the next day, as per our policy. He hung up and called my coworker, screaming that he wouldn't work with me anymore. That was a turning point for me. I had been keeping track of the materials he delivered, and I noticed discrepancies. My records showed we had 100 yards of a specific material, but my supervisor often asked for more loads because it seemed like we were running low. I had assumed the issue was on our end, but after being insulted, I decided to investigate further. I reached out to another vendor who delivered a different material. When I explained our situation, he was shocked at the low cost we were getting from the troublesome vendor. He suggested I check weight receipts, something I had never heard of before. I had noticed that other vendors included weights on their invoices, while this one only provided a handwritten ticket claiming he delivered 45 yards. Curious, I asked my new contact to help me. He managed to get weight receipts from the yard where the vendor picked up materials. To my disbelief, the receipts confirmed that he was only delivering 20 yards each time. He had been overcharging us by 75 yards with each order, which explained why he could offer such a low price. I dug through our past transactions, but without proper receipts from the previous office manager, it was hard to prove the extent of the issue. Still, I knew we had to stop working with him. I found a new vendor who offered a fair price and began ordering from him instead. As for the angry vendor, he never worked with that B word again. He reached out to my coworker a few times, but each time he was told to speak with me. He called me once, but I didn't answer. He had made it clear he didn't want to talk to me either, so he got his wish. I eventually left the office manager role, which I had found overwhelming. Thankfully, I was able to train the new manager much better than I had been trained. Now we work with more established companies that offer 30-day payment terms. It's a relief to see the improvements, even if it's bittersweet that my favorite vendor sold his company to a larger firm. But that's just business.